We welcome not only customers from the UK, but we also have customers from all over the world. I'm truly grateful for your contribution to our mission. We could not be here without all of you.
My experience here at Catalyze has been amazing. It's a great opportunity to meet with other individuals in my industry and just really look at all of the challenges and obstacles that we all face, because despite the fact that we're all so different, there are so many similarities, and it really allows us to connect and reach across those lines and really come to solutions together with Enable.
My time at Catalyze has been fantastic. I've had the opportunity to meet a number of people from a whole walk of industries that I wouldn't necessarily have otherwise met.
For our ecosystems in our own industries to survive, we really need to work as seamless extensions of each other's businesses. We really try to focus on that collaborative win-win situation. We need to really understand where the opportunity lies for both parties to come up with the best agreements.
If you wait on digital transformation until it is obvious, it is too late.
Happy Friday, happy Friday, happy Friday. Hello, Margaret.
Hi, Reggie. That's very, very exciting.
It was.
Way too happy for us British people. Although we technically should be happier because it's 5 o'clock on a Friday now. But yeah, way too happy. Clearly, yeah. I'm not sure. You've been putting something extra in your breakfast.
You know what? A, it's Friday. B, I get a chance to converse with you. And C, we have a special guest today. So I'm really excited. And D, I'm always energized when I see that Catalyze video. And Christos, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and I apologize if I'm not, that took place in Chicago. Last month, we had our annual conference called Catalyze. It was amazing, as you saw in the video. It's all about rebate management. We created like this huge event that brought everybody across the globe to talk about how they could better manage their rebates. So, like I said, it is Friday, Mark. Week.
And we've got like you said, a very special guest, another expert in their field. And we're going to talk about a slightly different type of rebate today as well, a whole different world that we've never talked about in the past. Oh, here's Tammy.
Shout out, Tammy. Yes, it was an amazing conference. Thank you, Tammy. Yeah, so sorry, you were saying special guest. This special guest is going to be bringing what to the table? Just let's give a little sneak peek before we bring on this special guest.
Yeah. So a different perspective to rebates. We always think about rebates are, driving sales, but this is not a rebate that is well, it technically is on one half, but on the other side, yeah, it's there's lots of terminology around this, and I'm looking forward to, first of all, getting through that terminology so that we can all be on the same page. So I'm not going to get into that just yet, but a whole different world. Rebates on things we didn't even realize rebates exist on. Okay. What about that for a cliffhanger?
Well, you had me at terminology. I'm ecstatic to talk about the various terminologies that you and this special guest will be discussing. And you know what? Without further ado, let's bring on the man, the legend, Chris Coffin, who is the senior vendor manager at Enable. So, welcome, Chris.
Happy Friday, 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 Friday.
Yes. It's like, how many times can you say Friday all at
And
once?
for our British folks, happy Friday.
That's it.
Is that better? Is that better, Mark? Hi, everybody. Really glad to be here. And yeah, let's talk about these rebates that are on things that we didn't even think rebates existed for.
Yes, and I'm like everybody else in the audience and everyone tuning in, they're excited just like me about the terminology. So go ahead, Mark. You want to say something?
Yeah, let's kick it off.
Yeah.
So Christopher, I did a poll a little while ago on our community, knowing that I'd seen these before, but nobody really talked about them. And then I went to a procurement conference and lots of people talked about them. And I thought, this is quite an inclusive little group and more people should know about this magic, and we should share the love. So what we're talking about here, and I use an accounting term. So we used to call them GNFR, or goods not for resale, rebates that we would earn on those things.
Yep.
You've got some other terminology. Do you want to explain what we're talking about here?
Sure. So goods not for resale are really, or GNFR, that's a very kind of retailer or wholesaler type term, because, in that business, you're in the business of buying products that you then onward sell. And of course, not everything you buy, you onward sell. There's some things that you buy that become part of your business. So whether that's software to run your business or shelving in the actual shop or rent and rates on your premises, those are all things that are effectively goods not for resale or other types of spend. In the financial services world, where I spent a lot of my career, we wouldn't call them GNFR. We would call them indirect spends. So things that are not directly related to the products and services that we offered, but were required in order to run ourselves as a business. And some of those have some pretty weighty price tags and have some pretty high volumes and can absolutely carry some rebates with them. So let's talk about them.
Yeah, and I suppose for anybody else as well, I mean, ultimately it's kind of like rebates on your overheads, isn't it? Yeah. So anything you don't sell that costs you money, you potentially can earn a rebate on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Question, because it's all new to me.
Yeah.
New to me, because I'm learning here. I love this. So could stationaries be considered?
For sure. I mean, that. In fact, stationary office supplies, that's a classic area where there is often repeat volumes. And in fact, I've seen companies try and get right down to minimizing the number of SKUs and forcing those SKUs to specific suppliers within their supplier's supply chain in order to maximize that benefit. So, I won't buy the Bic biro, I'll buy the Banner biro. That would be something that the folks in the UK would understand. And if I do that, then I can push through a better price point for myself. And if I reach a certain amount of volume in the year, then I get a credit back. Absolutely.
Good to have a Bic. I've lived on the Bics, albeit I don't like this one. I like the clear one.
The proper biro.
Yeah.
Or as we know in North America, a Bic pen. Yeah. It doesn't matter what brand it is, it's just a Bic.
Yeah. So and I mean we saw it to your point, Reggie. Anything where companies spend a lot of money and potentially they can divert that spend, they can consolidate it. In my mind, that's a perfect case for a rebate because you're trying to drive a behavior. And I think a good rebate always, that's one of its core objectives. So in terms of other areas, Chris, what are some of the common areas you've seen these types of rebates being offered?
Well, obviously we did touch on office supplies, but another area would be in like it's tangential cleaning and janitorial products and like consumables like papers, that sort of thing. Also, I've seen it in areas like travel. And so sometimes what you can get is for directing, especially if you're in a large corporate and you have a significant amount of travel, and obviously that's reduced a lot recently because of the pandemic, but you can get deals directly with airlines or via your third-party travel arranger in order to, so if you put so many miles of airfare through or dollars of airfare through a particular airline, then you can generate a rebate based on that. So that those are some common areas. I think the other thing is that even if you don't experience the rebate directly, you need to understand that your supplier, if they're a supplier of a certain kind of thing and they're doing it for multiple customers and they have the volume, they probably can. And you should use that in your negotiation strategy for sure to say, okay, so if I help you get to X% of your commit with whoever your supplier is, I want a piece of that action, and I want to decrease my price point. So I think there's lots of different ways to think about it. But what's interesting, I think, is that the people in roles like mine in procurement and buying, if you're in the goods for resale business, you're very highly attuned to rebates as part of the kind of the infrastructure of how you go about figuring out how much stuff you need, what price point it's going to be at, how much product you're going to ship, where it is in the store, all of those things. But if you're not, it's not something that automatically comes to mind. And if you've never worked in that environment, you don't necessarily even think about rebates. I know I worked in the financial services sector, like I said, for a long time, for very large multinationals. And it was very rare that we had actual rebate programs in place. Now, part of that is because the cost of capital is so low and we prefer to pay for things up front, and we would make those commitments up front and therefore secure ourselves with a discount based on spend that money because assets are more valued to a bank, say, than OPEX. And so, but I did sometimes see it. For instance, if we were going to do a big technology refresh, so we're going to change out all the desktops, laptops, or maybe even on a banking specific things. So things like cash recyclers in the branches, ATMs across the whole of the estate. If we're going to do an entire country, maybe multiple regions. I had seen rebates for that. So, hitting a certain number of units shipped by year end got you, an escalated rebate based on how many units you got shipped. So, yeah. There's lots of different areas where they apply. And like I say, I think people sometimes, if you're in a role where you've not been really exposed to retail or fast moving consumer goods, or produce or something, you might not even think about rebates.
Yeah, I think the great comment there from David. We see a lot in the B2C. It's incentives are everywhere in what we do, and they don't have to be on a physical item either. So the example I remember was a recruitment agency. I don't know if that's what you call them over there, but basically, who did resourcing for us, and whether we're using agency staff or actual permanent hires, it's a numbers game. The more assignments we gave them, the better for them. At the beginning of the year, you don't know how many people you're going to need to hire, or hopefully not many. But so they come along and they'll say, well, for argument's sake, your rate will be 15% of starting salary. And you're like, I want 10. Well, if they come along and say, well, you give me X amount of hires in the year, keep me busy, I can get it to 10 for you. And I think a lot of things like that people miss because it's so fragmented. Different managers are doing different hires. It's not consolidated. It means that you miss these opportunities, and it's an opportunity for your vendor because they get to work with you and understand your business, and the efficiencies are created there. But then obviously it becomes cheaper for you as well. So I've seen it in lots of different places. I also saw it in telecoms. So again, I don't know how the telecoms world works, but clearly the more you use it, the cheaper it gets. So there's incentives to be had there. And what I love about this is it doesn't matter what industry it is. Just about every industry has telecoms, physical property of some kind where they've maybe got stationary waste management. They've got people. They've got IT software and hardware. So this is completely industry agnostic, Reggie. You're probably earning rebates hopefully for Enable right now, and you don't even realize it. And if not, Chris is going to be onto it and earn us some rebates. But when I was at a procurement conference, a couple of universities came up to me, Chris, and they said, Mark, we have rebates. Sometimes we get paid them, sometimes we don't. And I said, well, how does that work? And they went, we don't really know. And what I see there is we've got one side trying to offer an incentive, and the other side just, unfortunately, it's not actually an incentive, because if you sometimes get paid it and sometimes you don't, and you don't know why, then it's not incentivizing you.
Yeah.
So what would your advice be to anybody who is in that scenario where they're kind of sometimes earning them, sometimes not?
So I think in my experience, what often there's kind of like two ways to view your suppliers when you're in a role like mine in procurement. The one view is that the role of procurement is to achieve the lowest possible cost for anything that you buy, and to use whatever levers are available to do so. And the other view, which I probably personally more subscribe to, not that savings are not important, because they are, is that trying to negotiate to the last penny on the table does a disservice to you and to the other company, and you're much better to find where you could maximize value than just try and drive the price through the floor. And I think what rebates are good at doing, that maybe discounts are not, is about allowing that room for partnership and creating mutual trust, instead of where I find discounts and maybe the other foot of procurement is more about distrust. I don't trust that you'll give me the best price. I don't trust that this is the best thing that you can offer. I don't trust that I'm getting the best deal. And so I think one of the big questions, if you're in this situation where you're being offered incentives and you don't really take advantage of them because you don't really understand them, or you don't know how you did or didn't get them, is ask yourself, what's your view of your supplier? Because if you view them as a supplier that you want to be in partnership with, that you want to maximize value with, then chances are you're doing the work to figure out, why are they incentivizing you for this? Why does it matter to them? And how does it matter to you? Or does it matter at all? Maybe I don't get a rebate because I don't want to do the thing they want to incentivize me for, and that's fine. But I would say if you're in a position where you don't know how the rebates are operating, you're probably in a position where you don't trust your supplier and you're not trying to partner with them. And that's why you don't understand what those incentives are. So I think it really boils down to asking yourself, how do we view the supplier? And is there a different way? Is there an alternate way to think about this that would actually be beneficial?
I have a couple of questions there, Chris, because you made some really great points. So one about maximizing value, right? You talk about building trust with your suppliers, getting to know your suppliers. What are some factors or variables that, you in your seat would have to take into account that ladder up to that theme of maximizing value?
So some of those things are understanding our own business and consumption patterns and where our demand comes from, so that I can do a better job of coaching my supplier about things that are interesting to us and things that really aren't. Because if you're trying to sell me, the classic saying is you can only sell to somebody who's willing to buy. And if you're trying to push something that I don't want, then I don't want to waste my time, and I'm going to tell you not to waste yours. And I think having that kind of frank and open discussion with your supplier is really an important kind of first step to being able to build that kind of trust and ladder that up to getting into maximizing value. I think understanding what's important to them is also really important. So, I might not be that interested in buying my pens from you, but if what's going to make your year is selling more pens because you've got a special deal with this pen company and you're trying to help them break into the market, then maybe I can flex my pen buying as long as the thing I'm really interested in, which is buying my paper from you, improves, right? So it's about trying to understand what is driving their behavior. And finally, it's about saying, okay, if I don't scrape every last dollar off the table, what is the overall value I get out of that? Are you going to contribute to some sort of innovation fund for me so that I can explore how this other part of your software package might actually benefit me without having to spend money to buy consulting hours to do it? Are you going to help me figure out how to streamline my data flow where you keep telling me I'm having to pay overages every month because my data flow is not very good? Well, help me fix that. So those are the kinds of things that are not necessarily directly on the bottom line. And honestly, they may not carry very well through to, say, goods for resale, where it really is about, what's the difference between the price I pay you and the price I sell it for. But on these indirects, it can drive a lot of your business decisions in terms of you have two suppliers, they offer very similar products, but supplier A is willing to make sure that shipment gets delivered and they do a very good job with their logistics and whatever, and partner B does a very bad job of packaging and palletizing and delivering to my warehouse. And so price alone is not enough for me. Price plus doing all those other things, I'm willing to spend an extra 2 cents each in order to get the delivery the way I want it.
I love that. Because like you said, it's like if their packaging isn't right, if they're meddling with the logistics and is actually creating more expenses for you, especially on the receiving end.
And they're invisible on the invoice.
Yeah.
Right. They're my costs of doing something once I get it from you. It doesn't show up as a supplier spend problem. But actually, if you palletize poorly and I've got to repack things, or if I've got to store them in ways that are not optimal in my warehouse facility, that costs me a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And it's completely invisible on your invoice.
And the other thing I've seen as well, Chris, I've only seen it once, but I thought it was really clever, is so in the UK, a lot of companies provide cars for their employees.
Yeah.
It's a taxable, a beneficial benefit you can give employees.
Yeah.
And you like whenever you lease a car, you'll get a mileage allowance. And when we do it personally, you just get an allowance. If you go under it, nothing. But if you go over it, you get charged. The way this contract worked, because it was literally thousands of cars, was, well, if you're under, we'll give you something back. And if you're over, we'll take something away. The idea being we win together and we lose together. So if you put loads of miles on your entire fleet, that fleet's not going to be worth as much. So we won't be able to sell those cars for as much. So actually, we need to take some money. And what we actually saw was during the pandemic, those cars didn't get used a lot. And actually, it saved us a small fortune as a business. But in fairness, it's the car leasing company was saving good money as well, because and so it was about creating that win-win. And so I think to your point on the the usage, if it's like mobile plans, things like that, if it's sharing the benefit, I think is really beneficial. And I think that hopefully that can apply to many relationships. I think good relationships, like you say, partnerships, both sides win or both sides lose. And if they're structured that way, hopefully both sides will aim to win.
I know I'm likely biased because I work for the company, but it's one of the things I really like about the Enable mantra is that, yes, we help you manage your rebates, but what we see us doing is helping you build trusted trading relationships. So we see us as a key input into helping you build trusted relationships that can deliver you that value. You mentioned fleet disappeared from the radar as a benefit for the most part in most of Canada and the US because of taxation rules. But I do know it's still very prevalent in Europe and in the UK. And I think absolutely fleet is an area where you can see some benefit. I think it's also true that there are lots of other areas where just because you haven't ever seen a rebate there doesn't mean you can't introduce the concept. Because one of the things that when you sit on my side of the negotiation table, one of the things that asking about rebates does is it starts a thought process on the other side. So maybe they've never done a rebate, but if you're open to the concept of a rebate, then maybe that changes the whole way their deal desk will think about your account. Whereas if you're always pressing for lower price, and believe me, I do press for low price, then their deal desk has a different perception of you as a client, as a customer. So, but absolutely.
I think, and it shows intent. I mean, really simply, I think if you go into a negotiation and just said, I want 3% discount off of this, you're asking for something and you're not giving anything back. Whereas if you say to them, and even if you said, I want 3% and I'll spend $1 million with you this year, they're probably thinking, I've heard this all before. Whereas if you go and say, well, look, if I spend $1 million with you, so you're starting out with what you're going to give them.
Yeah.
You give me 3% back at the end of the year. What they're thinking is, well, if I get that $1 million, brilliant. But secondly, you've added in end of the year, which means you're saying to them, I'm going to be, my intention is to do business with you for a long time. I just see that as far more collaborative. I think my parents always taught me, you should, nothing in life is free, and although I suspect the procurement people will disagree with me, that if you're going to ask for something, you better be prepared to give something back. I to your point, I think there's a lot of opportunity out there where people would lock in that security for knowing that they're going to get something back. So my next question, why is it, or why does this not get looked at as much as normal Y classes goods for resale procurement?
Well, I think it's not often talked about in terms of, like, I've been through a number of different procurement transformations and related training and 7 steps and gated processes, etc. And I could count on at least one hand, if not fewer fingers, the number of times the concept of rebates came up as something to a lever to use in that process. Now, admittedly, this is in a world with heavy indirects and almost no directs, right? So financial services is just almost everything you buy is about running the company, because what you sell as a bank are effectively intangible type services that are difficult to, to figure out how an application contributes directly to your savings account or your checking account. I mean, there are a few things, but most things are indirect. So it's just generally not something that procurement people that are not in the retail and wholesale distribution space think about. I think it's also true that it's just not considered a thing. Although, I would argue that you can find things that look an awful lot like a special pricing agreement or SPA or a rebate agreement in indirects. So, take your cloud provider in the IaaS world today, whichever, one of the big cloud providers you use, and chances are they have a marketplace. And chances are they will allow you to enter some sort of consumption or spend commit over a period of time. And in return, you get credits that you can then apply in their marketplace in order to buy additional products. And, so those seem an awful lot like rebate agreements, just under another guise. They're not called rebates, but they operate very similarly, right? You commit to spend a certain amount of money. That is a contractual commitment. If you don't meet it by the end of the time, you pay the balance anyway. But in return for all of that, you get discounts along the life of the agreement, or you get credits that you can use, or you get additional resources in the IaaS cloud, something that is additional benefit for you. So, that's just one area where, even though we don't really call them rebates, they're rebates. They're just under a different guise, So I think A, it's just not terminology we use a lot, but B, it's just not something we teach our people to do. And unless you have been through the gauntlet that is buying for resale, which is a very specific skill, and I would say is quite a different job than people in procurement that are not in that role. It's probably not something you've ever thought about.
Brilliant. So changing the subject slightly, Chris, Coffin's Corner. What is this that I keep seeing on LinkedIn?
Well, I call it Coffin's Court. And,
cool.
Yeah. And the whole concept is that, the concept of holding court and bringing people together to discuss whatever. It's a networking event. I hold it in downtown Toronto, King West Toronto. At the moment, I'm holding it every last Thursday of the month at a place called Ruby Soho, which is a pretty popular watering hole, and it's coincidentally not very far from our office in Toronto. There's kind of two thoughts. I've been blessed with a very interesting and positive career that has kept me both in Toronto and then taken me internationally. One of the downsides of that is that I left Toronto for a significant amount of time. And when I've come back, you kind of lose contact with people, even though you're connected on LinkedIn or whatever, you have a conversation once in a while. So I was trying to find a way to rekindle some of those connections across Toronto in a place that's generally easy to get to if you work downtown. And also, particularly with the people I work with in the Enable world, we're a young company. We have a lot of young and upcoming folks, especially in our sales organization, because a significant element of the sort of inside sales organization is based in Toronto. We also have a significant technology contingent of engineers in Toronto. And so, I wanted to find a way to give them an opportunity, an avenue to just pick my brain if they wanted to about the things I've done or seen in my career, etc. And ultimately, hopefully, forge a connection between all these people that I have in my kind of more recent Toronto life with my past Toronto life, and help make networking connections between them. So my thought is the only way to do that is to have something that is consistently in the same place at the same time, so people can know that if they show up on the last Thursday of the month at Ruby Soho at 5:15, they will find Coffin's Court, and they'll find me, and they'll find lots of interesting people to get to know. So that's what I've done. I've committed to doing it for a year. It'll be I started it in February, so we're just about halfway through, and we'll see where it gets to. And if you arrive early enough, you might get a free drink, because I usually put about $100 behind the bar, which doesn't last very long, but it does last a little while.
Sounds like an incentive to me.
Yeah.
Not really a rebate, but it's a discount.
No, that's cool. I like that, and it goes back to like even your tagline on your LinkedIn profile, where it's like it says "Get to know me," right? So your ability to create community and gather up the troops is a huge sentiment to who you are as a person, which is good, and giving back as well. If you're talking about the younger generation, they're just starting out. Could be starting out in their careers, and if you could help them navigate and help them grow, I think that's amazing. That's a lot of value right there. So kudos to you.
Well, and if anybody happens to be watching and they're going to be in Toronto next Thursday, the next Coffin's Court occurs on Thursday at 5:15 at Ruby Soho in King West. Come on by.
They got some good wings. They do.
I don't know. They've got good lager. I try one or two.
I do remember the food. They've been very good. You just have to watch out. If Resale from the product team comes, that'll be $100 just gone.
Quite possibly. Whoever shows up first gets it. That's the way it works. Be there early.
I went out for a few drinks with him. He likes to drink. So one last question relating to that then. So you mentioned the sales team come. You've got the kind of the technology. Which team do you prefer? Which team are better for a few drinks?
Oh, well, I don't think it's any surprise to anyone that sales teams are very good in social environments. So probably the sales team. But to be honest, I love my finance colleagues, and we're very blessed because our CFO globally is actually in the process of moving to Toronto. As Toronto continues to grow as one of the real epicenters of our business. And so I'm looking forward to Nick Rose arriving. He arrives early August and will be with us based out of Toronto for the foreseeable future. So that's exciting. So I guess it's neither is the answer, Mark. I choose the finance team, and that's as much for my own self-preservation as anything.
I was going to say, that was a very well-crafted answer.
Very, yeah. The life of the party, Chris Coffin. Appreciate you, man. All right. Well, this is a good discussion. Listen, I learned a lot. This gave a different lens in terms of, indirects and how you manage your rebates on your end with your suppliers and so forth. So, yeah, man, it's good stuff. And I hope everybody that's tuned in learned a lot as well. And Chris, we just want to thank you for your presence, your knowledge, your insights, and everybody tuning in. Have a great weekend. We'll be back with another episode of Great Rebaters soon, and we'll let you know.
Thanks for being here, everybody. It means a lot to me that you spent the time to come too. So thank you.
All right. Thanks. Take care, everyone. Bye.